I'd like to call the meeting to order. The Board of Leavenworth County Commissioners. I'd like to invite everyone to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
I'd like to start with a moment of silence. I'd like to ask everyone to remember one of our county employees who was injured in an accident over the weekend. We'll start roll call. We'll start with Mike Stevens.
Here.
Doug Smith is present. Chad Chimke.
Here.
Jeff Culberson by phone.
Here.
And Vicki Cause by phone.
Here.
All commissioners are present in some form. We'll skip the public comment. We'll move on to administrative business. Mr. Lawfrey.
The treasurer had asked if she could approach the board this morning, so I'll let her go first.
I'm out of breath from running up the stairs. I watched the meeting last week, and there was some mention of concern that the treasurer's office was going to be a little short on funds because of the extensions of the deadlines and not having the facility fees coming in. Gosh, I'm out of breath. I'm sorry. So, anyway, I have prepared a document. Would you? I need one.
We've received that, I believe.
You did receive it?
Yes, I got it this morning.
I made a copy for her.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I prepared a document that shows my previous year's revenue and expenses and just a few months of this year. And as you can see in March, the decline in the revenue due to the virus and the shutdown of the courthouse and, of course, nationwide. But this is the time that generally this fund is recovering from low revenue from December and January. And right now, we've got a pretty low balance, and I'm concerned that we have 3 payrolls next month. We do have an allocation, a motor vehicle fund allocation within the general fund treasurer's budget. And what I would like to do is transfer the motor vehicle fund employees to that general fund, at least through the April pay periods, and see how we go from there so this fund can recover somewhat. And that's why I'm here this morning. I wanted to, the funds are there. It's just I needed to check with you guys to make sure that that was okay to transfer those salaries to that fund for now.
Okay.
Normally, it's for over a year's time. That allocation is supposed to last throughout the year, and we've gone through the first quarter using about $40,000 of that. So that would leave right now close to $120,000 that's allocated in the general fund for motor vehicle salaries. So what I would like to do is just tap into that through April and see where we are at the end of the month on opening. And I know a lot of this revenue is not going to be able to be recaptured because it's facility fees, driver's license fees, and
Okay.
Janice,
that's why I'm here.
What is the forecasted April expense to the department?
Well, I can look at last year's, which was $56,000, but it's really less than that. It's probably closer to what we expended in March, which was $51,000, because I've eliminated a full-time management position that would include the benefits and the salary for that position, which would be close to $65,000. So that's per year.
One of my concerns, and this was a continuation from last week, and we had that conversation with the clerk, was, March is overstated, right? Most of March, at least the first couple, 2-3 weeks, was, I say business as usual, but
pretty close, yeah.
A lot closer than what we saw at the end of March,
Exactly.
and obviously what we're going to see in April. So while we may have trended 15 or 20,000 year over year less, I would forecast that whatever we've seen in the last week is more likely what we'd see for the entire month of April, which may have only been, several $1,000s in comparison. So the gap's probably pretty substantial, and I don't know that we've done that exercise yet. I just want to make sure that we do it before we'd authorize any transfer. Otherwise, we'll be making multiple transfers if we don't forecast it right.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Do we have a staff recommendation on this, Mark?
Well, obviously, this just came up this morning, so I haven't had a chance to really look through it. Typically, if we were going to take action, we would want it as an agenda item so that we could have a little more analysis. I think that obviously we knew the revenues were going to be down with the courthouse being closed. My concern is not that we make this change today. I think it's what you were just getting at, Commissioner Shimke, and that is that this is ongoing. If we do something today, we're going to have to do something next week and the week after. It probably makes sense to wait until we get a little further into the year before we make any permanent transfers or anything like that. But we can't also spend cash that we don't have. We have a cash balance that we have to maintain. So reallocating those expenditures from the motor vehicle fund to the general fund really probably doesn't matter. At the end of the year, we're going to have to make an amendment somewhere to make this balance out. I think actually in January and February we were already having those discussions. So I think that budgetarily this is all within the treasurer's budget. Making this adjustment now is probably fine. I don't see any issue with it because it's not a budget amendment. It's just reallocating those expenditures that we're going to be in motor vehicle over the general fund. But I think by the end of the year, we are going to have to amend the budget somewhere to make this balance out. So and we wouldn't do that until closer to the end of the year anyways, when we actually know what that true number would be.
So if we've traditionally put it on the agenda, would it make sense to do this analysis over the next week? And knowing there's no shortfall now, we could approve whatever transfer next week that would alleviate April. I think we've got to forecast what the gap is during the pandemic, and then I think we've got to forecast what the gap is for 2020.
Yeah, I think that, again, because it is all treasurer's budget, and I'm just looking at this morning. I haven't had a hard thought on this just yet, but because it is all the treasurer's budget, it really, it doesn't matter if the treasurer needs to move wages from between the two funds. I think she can do that. I think the problem is long term, and that gets towards the end of the year when we have to fix it. So it's if that's what we need to do to make sure that we have the cash available to make payroll, then I don't see a problem with it today. I think the analysis is going to be ongoing. I think it's month to month as we go forward, because my concern is that, and I know this to be a fact, we will exceed the general fund budget as well. So not only will we exceed the treasurer's motor vehicle fund, we will also exceed the general fund balance as well if we don't make any other changes to offset what we're doing. But we wouldn't typically do that until closer to the end of the year. But
I think had this not happened, I would have been on track to stay within this budget. Within the motor vehicle fund, I would have been fine. Had this all not happened with the COVID-19 virus, I was on track with my revenue. Everything was fine. I had reduced my expenditures. You can see that in February and March as compared to the previous year's monthly expenses. So I was on track to recover all of that. But with this happening, it severely reduced my revenue. So
Is a week long enough to get the information?
Well, I don't know how you can forecast what will happen and who will pay and who won't. That's my only concern. I ran a report earlier that showed we earned $11,000 in the motor vehicle fund in 10 days. So I think it will more than likely get worse because as the word gets out and people understand and know that the deadline has been extended, that they're just going to wait. If they don't have to pay, they're not going to pay. And all I can say is my forecast is it will get much worse, and we have 3 payrolls in April. So we will have everything hit us at once when the state opens up and everything returns back to normal. But right now, I don't really know how you can forecast what will happen.
Well, right now, Janice, I'm assuming the recommendation would be to move $8,000 or $10,000 for the time being based on what the balance is currently and what your forecasted expenses are, or no?
I was going to move all of payroll to general fund for the month of April.
And then, so what happens in the existing balance? It just stays?
Yes, it just stays. And then hopefully, things will equalize closer to the end of the year, and I can do a journal entry and transfer funds back to the general fund if that's possible, based on the revenue that I received this year.
So, Mark, can you, I think maybe we should have you look at this a little closer and bring us back a recommendation for next week.
I can do that. I mean, I can look at it and give a little more in-depth analysis, but I would say that there's really no point in making these changes every week. I think it's just, this is going to be an ongoing thing until we get past where we are right now. I believe that as long as the treasurer stays within both budgets, that it's an allowable thing. I don't think we need to do a whole lot right now, but I do think that there's no way we are going to make budget by the end of the year. It's just not going to happen unless.
Well, not by the end of the month. I mean, I have a balance of $43,000.
I mean both funds.
Yeah.
I mean, last year, if I'm looking at your revenue and expenditures correctly, last year in your motor vehicle fund, you overspent revenue already. So, and with the general fund, we can make some of that up, but I believe we also exceeded the general fund budget as well last year. So this just kind of compounds it. I think there were maybe some adjustments made to alleviate that this year, but now with the shortage in revenue, I just don't see how it's going to happen. But, I mean, I can give you an analysis on where we are today, but I don't know that that's going to be very helpful because it's going to change week to week.
Well, I don't know how it's typically been handled. It would just seem to me to make sense that if there's a $10,000 gap today between what the balance is and what the expenses will be, that's a line item transfer that we can easily track.
Yes.
If we track April's income and it's nominal at best, then it's likely that for May, we're not going to have a gap of $10,000, we're going to have a gap of $50,000.
Right.
And so we could make another line item at that time.
Yeah.
And so it'd be very easy to track those line items as the year goes on. Whether it normalizes or not is still to be determined. But
Yeah, and that is in our system. I mean, that would definitely be, we would see which salaries should have been allocated to the motor vehicle fund, but they're being allocated to the general fund, so we can track that. I guess what I'm saying is that's within the budget, and that it's until we get to towards the end of the year where we
Right.
run out of budget. That's when the board is going to have to take action to amend the budget. Now, can changes be made in between now and then? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the operations in the Treasurer's Department. If there will be a savings because one of the buildings is shut down, maybe we'll see a savings there that will help offset some of this. I don't know. It's too soon to tell.
I have reduced everything at the annex that I can. I'm
Yeah.
not paying the custodian. I've eliminated a position. As far as the budget from last year, I was over $8,000. I was over $8,000 in that budget, and I think the board knows why. However, that's why that is a non-budgeted fund, because it's hard to predict the expenses in the motor vehicle fund. So that's why it is called a non-budgeted fund. And the cash was there. It may have been over budget, but the cash was there. And that's why it's a non-budgeted fund, because it's a fee-based fund. It's not like I get a big pot of money on January 1 like all the other funds. So that is why it's called a non-budgeted fund. So technically, yes, I may have been over budget. However, it's a non-budgeted fund.
Right. I mean, I think right now we're trying to solve an
Yeah.
issue specific to the treasurer, but
Sure.
I think this is a much larger issue.
It is, but
across
I
the
will tell
county.
you that treasurers statewide are dealing with this.
Right.
This is not just a Leavenworth County issue.
Right. That's my point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, one of the things when we do the budget for the next year, we have to do a forecast on where we think our revenues for this year are going to come in versus budgeted. And I think that's probably going to be a lot more accurate than anything we do right now.
Sure.
Because by then, hopefully, the economy will be the courthouses will be open back up and the economy will be back on swing. People will be buying cars, hopefully. So, anywho, I can give you an analysis next week of where we are today, but it really probably doesn't have a lot of value given we don't know what the revenue or we do know the expenditures, obviously, but we don't know what the revenue is going to do in the next 2 weeks to 3 weeks or 4 weeks even. So.
Yeah, I don't know what typically the best practice has been. So what, as far as the budget and working with the clerk or how we've typically handled these in the past. But if there's a gap in any department, I would think that there's a best practice to how we're going to handle it versus moving.
This is fairly unique in that, as the treasurer mentioned, this is not a budgeted fund. It's a revenue and expenditure fund. So basically, they have to stay within their revenue. That's how that budget, not budget, but how that fund works.
It's one of the few departments that's operating like all the businesses out there that when they're closed, they don't make money.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Right. So the other departments, their revenue is, most of them are going to be general fund or like road and bridge. Those are the big ones. That revenue continues on for the most part. Where we're going to see a reduction is going to be like sales tax, the special sales tax that we have. We're obviously going to see a reduction in that. The gas tax that we use for roads, there's going to be a reduction there. People aren't buying near as much gas. I mean, you can probably see that on your way here in the morning. There's just not as many cars on the road. So we'll see reductions there, but those aren't typically part of our operations. Those are more project related. So we may have to reduce our projects or change the way we fund some of those projects, but the operations and the other funds should go on without much of a hiccup. This one is very unique in that it is solely revenue to expenditures related. And if they're not bringing in the revenue that they thought they were, and their expenditures are kind of fixed, that becomes problematic when you are where you are with today's.
And whether it's the Treasurers Association or clerks, is there anybody right now that's talking about the federal position on this? I mean, everything I've seen specific to SBAs and this new CARE Act, all these things are focused towards the private sector. But clearly there's going to be a gap in the public. So I wonder if that's even being discussed right now, or when these funds disappear and then most likely, or we hope, we're going to see a delay or some leniency on property taxes, and then property tax collections likely going to be impacted. And so all these things have a downstream effect. So.
State and local government was intentionally and specifically excluded from the new act that the federal government implemented. Obviously, there's some things we can't take advantage of anyways. Tax credits, we don't pay taxes, so they excluded us from the tax credits and some of the other things. There's no loan for us to go out that will get forgiven later, so it is what it is. I mean, I think as you mentioned, in a business you have to amend your business practices if your revenue isn't where you thought it might be. This is the one of the only funds that we have that's kind of in that situation.
And it may come to the point where I have to furlough people, and I hate to do that because it takes a lot of time to train these individuals. These are not entry-level positions anymore.
Right.
These are tough jobs. And
well, the demand doesn't change.
I'm sorry?
The demand's not going to change. As soon as we're open back up,
Well,
the demand will be there.
And that's the problem. I'd hate to furlough someone and then them go out and get another job, and then I'm into retraining all over again. So there's that. I'm not really sure. That's why I'm here. What are your suggestions? So.
Do you think the federal government's going to look at local governments, that this would be like a FEMA event? Disaster to us?
I think any of our
funds available?
Yeah, I think any of our expenditures that are directly related to the COVID-19 response, we can definitely track, and the FEMA has already said that we'll be eligible for reimbursement, but it has to be directly related to the response. So, like the group we set up out at the health department that's responding and tracking the cases and all that, we can track that, and if there's any overtime related, obviously we can also track that. but our daily operations are our daily operations. Those would have occurred whether there was a COVID-19 or not. They're not going to allow us to bill them for lost revenue. We can bill them for expenditures directly related to the response.
Okay. Well, we're still waiting on the Linwood tornado FEMA money.
That is true. A year later, and we haven't even got a whiff that they're going to reimburse us for that, much less when we might get reimbursed. So
Okay.
and anticipating that every state and probably almost every municipality in the United States will be submitting a claim to FEMA for COVID-related expenditures. I anticipate that it will be a long time coming.
Okay. So we want to bring this back next week. Is that where you're at, Chad?
I mean, I think it would be good to at least have, some type of dialogue with Mark and obviously how this impacts the larger budget. I realize that regardless of how it's tracked, we need to solve for it. We've got to fix April, so that's obvious. Right. There's enough of a balance today to at least address the next pay period. So again, just thinking about next week, what we're going to do to solve April, and then ultimately by next week, we'll probably know what May's going to look like. I mean, we could.
Yeah.
So.
The sales tax, we really won't know. I mean, it's always a month behind. So we won't know. Like, I can't go today and look and see where I'm at sales tax-wise because the companies don't even report it until after the end of the month. So we won't know really what happened in April until June. And that's just kind of the way it works as far as sales tax goes. And that's the one I'm looking at. It's going to be our biggest impact countywide. This, obviously, they can...
But we can track this fund.
They can look at it day to day. They know
Right.
the revenues day to day, so...
And forecast it out appropriately, so.
Okay. Is that where you're at on this?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Give
Any of the commissioners on the phone have any thoughts?
Vicki or Jeff, any thoughts?
Just listening.
Okay.
Just listening.
Okay. All right. So we'll bring it back next week?
Yeah, we'll bring it
Okay.
back next week.
All right.
And I would just also ask Janet if over the next 3, 4, 5 days, as we're tracking the revenue daily, do the best forecast we can for April. Again, it's not a one-to-one, but my guess is the activity of this week is likely to be representative of the next 3 weeks. And like you said, as more and more people find out about
The extension.
the extensions, we might even see the dailies go down, in which case, yeah, we'll have a much better feel. So.
And maybe we'll have an idea from the state, too, of, how long we're going to be closed within the next week or two, so.
Yep.
Be a good time to expand your parking lot down at the annex. Because I think you're going to need it once this is lifted.
Yeah, it's going to
People
be
getting their driver's license and
It's gonna be,
getting caught up.
tough at that point. It's just getting through right now, I think, so.
Can you tell people, just for the public consumption, what if you have a car that needs to have it to be tagged? Say you bought a new vehicle. What do they need to do?
Well, that's why I brought Jennifer.
So it makes it a little hard for us to do it right now because on renewals, you know the amount that the money is. So we can look up how much a renewal is, but on a new tag, it's hard because we don't know what the funds are unless we have the paperwork. So it's a couple trips if it's done. If you buy a new vehicle, you would need an inspection probably if it's not a Kansas title or a certificate of origin, you need the inspection, and the inspection stations are closed. So the title, insurance, sales tax receipt, or invoice from a dealership is usually what we need. But we can't do those right now because we don't know how much somebody is going to pay. That's a person-to-person interaction.
And right now, the state did extend everything 60 days until after they reopen. So it's not 60 days from today or last week. It's 60 days from the day they reopen. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yeah. So after everything gets back to open, I'm not going to say normal because that'll be a while, but everything, once the state opens back up, then they have 60 days from that date to complete any transactions that they need.
So if they reopen in May, then it'd be that date in July.
Yeah.
That would be the grace period.
Correct.
And I think that law enforcement obviously has been updated as to being more lenient, knowing the issues that residents are up against right now. So,
Right, and they extended that, I believe, for anything that happened after January 1. So if you have expired tags from last year, this isn't giving you a grace period. If you have expired tags or an expired 60-day temporary tag from this year, you get that 60 days from the day they reopen. So I think that's how they're trying to accommodate it. So we could have a 60-day period where things are really, really hectic after this all reopens.
But if you buy a vehicle from an individual,
Well, that's the hard part. I think
you're not going to be able to do anything with that
If you buy it from a
vehicle.
dealer, you're going to get a temporary
Right.
tag. But if it's an individual-to-individual transaction, that's what makes it difficult. Because we're not.
You don't have anything to put on there for a license plate.
We probably could still do a temporary tag because all you need is the title insurance. Inspections can wait for the temporary tag, and those are $8 across the board.
Okay.
So you could do it with copies. We don't keep the title for
Okay.
that, so if it's emailed in, then we could issue a temporary tag.
Okay. All right. Well, that's
So Mark, has anybody reached out to law enforcement to make sure that they're on the same page, that they're not going to write tickets for people with expired tags?
I have spoken with the sheriff, and he said that was the case, that they are not
Okay.
pulling anyone over.
The governor's
About
office, the governor's office actually put out a directive to law enforcement statewide asking them to take into consideration this shutdown and then the 60 days after.
Okay.
and Janice, you had shared that most interactions with your department now is happening via email.
Via
People
email.
are hearing back from your department within, hours. It's not taking days,
Yeah,
right? So
I mean, yeah.
you guys are being
I have two salaried
responsive.
people that are answering emails all evening. So we are not taking phone calls right now because it's absolutely overwhelming for
a small team.
working teams. So what we're doing is we're processing all requests by email, and we're answering email in the evening, and as fast as we can, I don't think there's much of a turnaround time on an email response, do you? Minutes possibly, so.
okay.
Thank you. Very helpful.
I would ask, have you had complaints at all? I mean, the board, has the board heard complaints
About the tags?
about the phone calls?
No, I haven't. I just met a fellow in the parking lot this morning that had just bought a new car, and that's why I didn't know I knew the state was closed, but I didn't know what the status of that was.
Well, we do have a message on our answering service that asks them to email us directly, and they would get a prompt response because, like I said, if the phones are on, all we do is answer the phone. So at least if you email us, we have a record of the request, and we get back to them right away.
Yeah. I've received a few complaints about the phones, but
Okay.
it's not overwhelming. It's not like
I
100
think
days.
that was before I got the message on there.
I've got just a few complaints that they're saying they're not getting an answer.
Yeah, I think we have fixed that, so.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. All right.
But a few other items
Oh,
under
okay. I'm
administrative
sorry.
business, if that's okay. One of the things I wanted to bring up, and the clerk is here so she can answer questions or maybe provide more information, but, as this moves forward, we're really concerned about how elections are going to happen, especially the primary coming up in August. And I know the Clerks Association has asked the state to consider allowing mail-in ballots for this upcoming election, and so far, they have been non-responsive to that request. And, I think Janet had pointed out earlier, a lot of the staff that they use during elections are those who are in the highest risk population. And not only that, trying to, we can't just make a decision last minute and get ballots printed, sent out in time for people to respond. So not knowing where this is going to end, the state, I would hope, would maybe change their stance on this and allow us just for a one-time exception to allow mail ballots, even though it's for an actual election for positions. But so far, we've had no success with that, and I'll probably bring that up like at least once a month until the state does the right thing. In my opinion.
Do we need to sign a letter of support and send it to all of our representatives and our senators in the county?
Well, I think that would be helpful. I don't believe there will be a change of the Secretary of State's mind, but I think any sort of, I hate to use the word pressure, but any sort of information that we can give our representatives as to the potential that the county is looking at if this virus goes on much longer. Every day I probably answer 25 or 30 emails with other clerks. Now, Wyandotte County, they're doing 3 different mailings. They're going to mail a postcard, and then they're mailing the application, and then they're going to mail another reminder postcard. Well, I don't really want to go through that expense. That's why I'm very much of an advocate for the mail ballot, because we're doing one mailing. We're doing one mailing with the ballot. The envelope has the instructions on it. The process is very easy. People are voting in their homes. We verify signatures to make sure that there is no fraud going on. So I think, at least Leavenworth County, because we have done so many mail ballot elections, realize the pros and the cons. And in this case, the pros definitely outweigh any sort of a con.
Now, Janet,
Just one second.
okay, go
we
ahead.
talk about budgets, and look at even what this will do to the election budget. Because if I do have to mail out advanced ballot applications, call it a mail ballot, or you just go through the process of the advanced ballot applications, the cost to a county will be more using the application than just doing one mailing.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, that's what I was going to say. In our special elections, you mailed out a application for an advance ballot to every registered voter, and the response rate that you got was not all that high for that particular type of election. Although we're going to be in a general election situation this time. And that's the first comment. And the second thing is, does this require a change in the statute for them to be able to send mail ballot with names on it?
It would just take an executive order. The Secretary of State could authorize a mail ballot election in these extraordinary times. And that's what it's actually called, an extraordinary measure. And the Secretary of State has that ability to be able to either authorize statewide or by county for a mail ballot election.
But the county cannot
The county has...
make that decision.
No.
And the governor can override?
I don't believe that...
Secretary of State.
Yeah, and I don't believe that if the Secretary of the State and the governor, I think they would be on the same page, whatever decision is made. I don't foresee any of that.
Do you know the date, the latest date this could be decided to do the mail-in? I mean, I know the sooner the better,
I'd hate to even say hardly June 1st. I don't think people realize what's involved because ordering the envelopes, I tried to order extra envelopes even for advanced ballot applications and, doing it by mail. We're back ordered, because every county or, whatever municipality that holds elections throughout the entire nation is confronting this. And
Yeah, I mean, sourcing in general across
I mean,
the
it
world
just-
right now is a problem.
That's right. And I don't think we're even thinking about it, because even listening to the news this morning, we've not even reached the peak.
Right.
And I heard in Missouri, that peak isn't going to be reached until like the 23rd of May. And so each day, each week that goes by, it makes a difference. It really does. It makes a big difference.
So if we can't do a mail ballot, you're certainly going to do a mailing out the applications, though, if we...
Absolutely. I will mail countywide. I've already started looking. I've talked to our printer. We use Record News, which is down there on 2440, to help with mailings, even to get some reduced postage rates. So yeah, I've already have that in place. Some of the counties have already sent out the applications. Some of them sent them out yesterday. I feel it's still a little early to do that, but probably by the middle of April, our applications will go in the mail.
Is there a rule, or are you empowered to, say you wanted to consolidate precincts to a smaller number of locations so you wouldn't have to have the concentration of older workers? Is that something you're allowed to do under the law?
Yes. We can't have like a vote center per se, but let's just say one of my polling places did not allow us to be voting at this upcoming election, whether it's August or November. I could move those voters to a different location. So yes. And quite truthfully, guys, I'll probably take advantage of that, especially in August.
You know, one of the things that I know that you kind of alluded to at one point, but and because we have seniors and like high school students, seniors, and older youth, and we've got kids online right now, we could probably reach out to the school district and ask them to solicit high school students to participate in serving at all of the different polling locations.
Yes, that's true. There will be some public service announcements even made asking students to work at the different sites. Leavenworth County has taken advantage of that for several years now. We have reached out to all the school districts throughout the county and enlisted students to participate in the election process.
Your Democratic and Republican chairs, aren't they supposed to be aiding you in finding poll workers as well?
Yes, they can certainly aid us in helping, and they do. I don't,
Right.
have a problem with that. It's just most of that responsibility just falls on our office because of the contact that we have to have with them, and asking them to work. And it's not even just having them work on Election Day. There's mandatory training that has to take place in August and November. Mandatory. That we have all the election workers come in. I take about a week and, do 40, 50 people at a time, mandatory training. And so there's just a lot involved, whereas if we were able to have a mail ballot election, that would be curtailed.
Just seems irresponsible for us to even ask people to man those polls if the virus is still spreading, which is one of the concerns why we were hoping the state would take a different approach, the Secretary of State specifically, because regardless of age, if I'm a parent and I know that the younger kids have a better chance of recovery, I'm still not wanting my kid to go to a location where 3,000 to 4,000 people might be coming through the door that day. Just not doing it. And then if I wouldn't do it for my kids, I wouldn't know why I could responsibly ask anybody else to do it for them. And definitely the older generation, I don't see how we could even ask them. It seems irresponsible for the state not to allow an extraordinary measure in this case.
They're going to have to allow the mail-in because it violates their own regulation right now to have a regular election. I think they're just waiting until the last minute.
Well, you can't wait till the last minute. And in different conference calls that we've had with the Secretary of State, I know, they say August 4th. It's several months away.
Not really.
Just like I said last week, it takes months and months to plan an election. Months. Anyone who has worked for me does not realize the time it takes in preparing for an election.
Well, I think if we can get, like we've talked about on the property tax collection, if we can put a letter together, and I'm sure there's a lot of verbiage that the clerks have already exchanged, that we can get to all of our representatives. That's one of the few things that we can do to try to help further that conversation with the state.
So if
I'll
we put
prepare a
together
letter. I will. I'll prepare something that lists, particular reasons why. I think that will help us more than anything is if we bullet point 10 reasons why we feel that it is necessary.
Well, the safety piece is obvious, right? But think about the cost savings. So, and right now, we've just been having conversation all morning about the economics associated to the pandemic, right? And so if across every county you're able to recognize savings by doing something, those are the creative solutions we should be looking for, knowing that there's going to be an economic shortfall.
And I would emphasize that it's a temporary measure because I understand a lot of people still like to go to the polls. And I personally would not be willing to end that as a practice. But for this circumstance, it seems very, very reasonable.
Exactly, Mike. I realize that also. But in these times,
We'll draft the letter and put it on the agenda for you all to vote on and approve.
Next
Well,
week.
we can get it on next week, and then we can get that sent to our representatives. They seem to have a little extra time on their hands, too, so they've been pretty responsive.
No, that's great.
Sounds
Thank
good
you.
to me.
Okay. That's what we'll do.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have actually two other items on administrative business. One of them, just kind of an update. I think you all saw the county health office put out kind of a map outlay yesterday of the known cases of coronavirus in the county and also those that are believed to be cases, but because we don't have enough testing, we can't confirm those. But they show all the signs and symptoms and they test negative for the flu viruses. So I thought that was good, but we've had a lot of requests from people saying, well, where specifically are these people at? Where do they go to church? One, they have a right to privacy. I know that this is it's better to have information and everybody's a little panicked about it, but those folks who do have it or suspect of having it, one, they have a right to privacy. We cannot share that. Number two, because it's now community spread, you do not know where they contracted the virus. And so therefore, even if there was some way we could breadcrumb that person's travel, you cannot determine where they contracted it from in that travel. So it gives a false sense of security if we say all of the cases are in this particular area of the county. That's a false sense of security. Then people have a tendency to go and say, well, it doesn't apply here. We're safe. We're going to go out. We're going to violate the social distancing. So if people are frustrated that there's not specific information, it's those two reasons. One, they have a right to privacy, and two, you need to be aware that no matter where you are, because it's now community spread, no matter where you are in Leavenworth County, Johnson County, Wyandotte County, you could contract the virus, and you need to practice social distancing, and you need to stay at home when possible. That's my soapbox for that item today.
Thank you, Mark.
Sure. The other thing I have on the agenda under administrative business is building codes. Last week we talked about a work session with the committee that's that is considering building codes. And as I think about it, I think it's important that this board, excuse me, actually makes a determination if you support building codes, that it needs to be firm that we're going to go forward with building codes before we actually have that work session, because otherwise it just seems a waste of time that we have this group go and spend their time and identify what building codes are, and we have a work session, and then it comes back and we really don't even have support for it board-wide. And since we haven't really voted on it, there is no, I can't make an assumption that it's a majority of the board even supports building codes. So if you would allow, I would like to put this on the agenda for the board to formally vote on adoption of building codes, and then understanding we will identify what those codes are. This is not we have to adopt them, we have to approve this measure to find out what's in the measure. This is, we're going a path. This is for sure the path we're going, and then we'll work through the details, kind of like, I guess you would say countywide zoning. Would we do countywide zoning? Yes, they voted on that. Then we determined what was part of that zoning, and that was years and years ago, obviously, 40 or 50 years ago. So
1962.
yeah, so
So the
60
problem,
years
I
ago.
mean, the deal is that the devil's always in the details,
Right.
and I think there's a philosophy that some of us are willing to go with some minimal building codes, but it wouldn't look like a Johnson County type building code. So if it was going to be the choice between one or the other, that would be where we would have to draw the line. So if you just want to say philosophically, do we want to proceed with looking at adopting building codes, that's kind of a more general statement.
Well, again, what I don't want to get into, and we had a similar conversation a little over a year ago when we talked about the comp plan. I don't want to go down the road of all this work and putting stuff together and then find out that really there isn't support for something. So it's better to find out now than after the fact that this committee gets together and spends their time on it, and then find out that really we don't even have the support to do building codes. So I just would like to, if the board would support it, I'd like to formalize that we're pursuing building codes and that the commission supports building codes. And I know that there's at least one person who doesn't. We all know that, but I don't know if there's 3 people who don't, and that's what I'm trying to get to.
Well, I think we all can agree that we did not want the inspection part of it. Am I safe in saying that? Because we just,
Right.
I think it started out as, this is what Leavenworth County is going to require. You're signing, your builder is signing that they are building to that code. It still falls back on the property owner.
Yeah, but I don't want to take a step backward. I think there was enough support to clearly request a committee be formed and a committee make recommendations. To me, that's the same as what you're kind of requesting now, in that there was at least enough support to implement a minimum standard, safety standard, whatever that may look like. And then I think to Mike's point was that if the committee comes back and is recommending something that is very aggressive in comparison to what we've all been discussed, then it's not going to be met with support.
And there was some recommendation when they're on the, just for example, an event.
Right, commercial.
Yeah, commercial where the public's going to be inside.
Yeah, I think there was unanimous actual support on the commercial side. I think there's maybe some resistance on the residential side, but still, there is, I thought, enough support to say, if we can get to a minimum set of standards that we don't think creates additional expense for builders or homeowners, and we're not slowing down those processes, it's not coming with a cost to the county, which was the inspection services side, then there was at least enough support to continue to move forward and have this committee meet. Now, I don't know if this committee can even meet and stay 6 feet apart at this time, so.
Probably not. I mean, it's probably a ways down the road before we can even have that,
Right.
especially in
I mean,
fulfill
do you
the
need a
public
formal
notice.
vote? Because this sounds like you
Well-
have a consensus.
Sometimes consensus have a habit of changing once we get into the room, and I think we've seen some of that. Not that the consensus changed, but what we see is when we get to that committee meeting, if we're not clear on our stance, we spend most of that work session trying to solidify the stance of the commission, and then we spend very little actually talking to the committee on and giving direction on what the board's expecting. So I just wanted to be sure that we're clear, or that the board is firm, that they do support building codes as a majority, not unanimously, but as a majority, that they support pursuing building codes. Because last week it seemed like there was, I just want to be sure if we're going to have that work session that the board is firm on that, at least that aspect.
I'm firm on it.
Yeah.
I think we all are.
Okay, so
Well,
then,
maybe-
that's good. That's really all I was looking for. Just wanted to make sure before we went on. That's all I have under administrative
No
business.
inspections.
That was
Okay. The only thing I'd have, Mr. Laughlin, Mr. Knowles here, you know
Can
about...
I interject
Yes, you can.
just a minute?
Go ahead.
Yeah, just administratively, I just want to let everybody know that I have obtained 44 processes for public comment from other counties, and at some point, we probably need to have it placed on a work or something so I can share what I've learned.
Okay.
So,
Well, let's do that next week. We got quite a bit on today.
Right.
That work?
on that note of along public comments, and I was wondering if there was a way that we could allow, like if someone wanted to make a public comment, like maybe notify Mark on Monday before the meeting on Wednesday, and then we could call them and they could, maybe we could like allow 10 minutes or something on the phone. Or Skype. I don't know if we have the technology to Skype it in.
We only allow 5 minutes here.
I mean total 10
Oh.
minutes.
Okay.
I don't mean each individual 10 minutes, but
Okay.
allow some.
If it's an agenda item?
Like
maybe.
allow some amount of, like maybe we would reach out to the, like if they notified Mark by Monday that they wanted to be on public comment, then
Or
maybe we
agenda
could.
item?
It could be an individual agenda item, or it could just be general public comment. But then we maybe could call them on the telephone and put them on, or use some technology in order to have some form of public comment while we're sort of sequestered with the virus.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that one next week. That'd be okay?
That's fine.
Okay. When we do the other. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, is that all you had, Vicki?
Yeah.
Okay,
thanks.
thank you. The only thing I had was the chemical purchase at noxious weed. How are we going to deal with that for farmers to, you got a small window of opportunity to control your noxious weeds. Too bad we didn't go to the voucher system last year.
That would have worked. Well, one of the things that, and actually we were just talking about this yesterday, because the facility is closed to the public, and all of our facilities are,
Right.
and we can't regulate, we don't have a good way of regulating how many and who might be coming in at any given time. Really, we're not doing any chemical sales through the noxious weed department right now. I believe there was maybe some bulk sales that an individual purchased that was delivered through, what's the farm? Murfield Farms. They did a bulk purchase earlier in the year. And so they got their delivery where we didn't have any interaction between our staff and their staff. And we were trying to figure out a good way to allow some of that, but I just can't come up with a solution that would allow folks to come into their building out there without violating our own social distancing guidelines. So it's unfortunate and difficult, but we couldn't resolve it without just saying we're not going to do it until this.
So there was an announcement put out that we put out, if I remember correctly, and it was that we didn't really have a way to address it, but they could call with questions. So we are taking phone calls. We're just politely telling them we can't sell you anything.
Exactly. That's correct.
Mechanical control of your noxious weeds.
Well, there are other opportunities to purchase these chemicals that are not county involved. It's just not at a reduced rate.
Right.
Right.
We're not the only seller of chemicals in the county, obviously. There's the co-ops, and Murfield Farms, I think, actually sells them, and Home Depot and whatever. It's just that ours is at a reduced rate. We supplement the cost of the chemicals. That's just not an opportunity right now with us being closed.
Has anybody reached out to the state noxious weed director to see what we're supposed to do on this?
Well, I believe he's not in the office either, because that office is closed with the state closures as well, but we can certainly try to reach out to him.
What's the audience of impact? Like how many consumers, transactions, volume, any idea? I mean, I just wondered if we're talking hundreds or talking thousands of people.
I'd say thousands.
Thousands?
Yeah, it's usually every day somebody stops by and buys chemical.
I know a lot of agricultural places are being applied by a contractor.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, the contractor had previously ordered a pallet to be placed on other people's properties, and so they had backed that out to the gate and delivered it and had it taken out to work with, because there was no interaction on the market.
There's no way we can do the vouchers now because you got to do your noxious weed report for the year to say how you're going to do it.
How we're going to do it, yeah.
And we do a 25% discount. I guess we won't be sending out any noxious weed letters to folks this year.
Should we, at a minimum, communication to those, and I guess it's not as though we have all of our consumers' emails on file, but at least any type of publication that might give them give them some direction, right?
Yeah.
If there are 3 or 4 other resources.
He has records on who buys chemicals.
Right.
Every year. I mean, that's tracked.
So you just like maybe list other opportunities or resources that they could utilize to acquire the chemicals.
Right. So again, private sector entities where they can obtain those same chemicals that they're so dependent on. If we can't sell it, maybe if nothing else, we can at least educate them on where they can
Put
get
a
it.
list of vendors in our county that do supply them,
Right.
but they just won't get the.
I realize there's
25%
Google.
discount.
Some of them have, I'm sure, solved it already, but anything we can do to educate, we probably should.
Oh, but 25% discount on a pallet of chemicals is a pretty big.
Oh, yeah,
deal.
no, it doesn't
Oh, yeah.
solve the financial part, but.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to make sure we're following the noxious weed law and what we have to do. Because, all right, that's all I had.
I have a question for the county councilor. Can you tell us what the status of our emergency order is? I imagine it's been subrogated by the state order. When the state order expires, what is the status of the county's emergency order? Does it come back into effect, or do we have to do something as a board? Can you kind of tell us where we're at on all that?
Well, Commissioners, actually, the way Kansas law is written, your local health officer has authority over the state. If the local health officer determined that in order to prevent the spread of an infectious disease was necessary, even in the absence of any order from the state, the health officer can issue that order. I'd also give you the opinion that if the health officer found that actions in addition to any state order were necessary, he has the authority to implement those actions. Your local control over the prevention of the spread of infectious diseases is paramount. That order will remain in effect until it's rescinded by the local health officer. I would just offer this analogy. The commission drives the car or the vehicle of government. Right now, the wheel is in the hands of your health officer. It's intended to be that way by statute. And that means that it is of a paramount interest of public safety that the control of the spread of infectious diseases be vested in the local health officer, which you do choose, but that local health officer has ultimate authority. So his order will remain in effect until it's rescinded. And I'd offer, again, the opinion that even if the state were to say no further social distancing or closures were required, if your local health officer found that in Leavenworth County it was necessary, he would have the authority to issue that order.
Okay, and our order currently in existence that we adopted, it has a 60-day time frame connected to
I
it.
believe so, Commissioner, and if the health officer felt it was necessary to extend that, I think it would be incumbent upon this board to do so.
So I think just clarification, there's a difference between the order from the health officer for the stay-at-home order and the declaration of an emergency. The declaration of an emergency is 60 days from the date it was issued. The order from the health officer goes until the 23rd, I believe.
Right, it was 30 days.
So now that can be extended, obviously, by the health officer. Just the state sent out their order, which was a little confusing to me, and because of exactly what the county councilor just said, is the local authority actually, by statute, has, the local health officer has more authority. And they said, we supersede all other orders. Well, basically, they just adopted what we were already implementing. But in their order, it specifically says, as soon as our order expires, any local orders go back into effect. So there's no, we wouldn't have to repeal and then reapprove or reapprove anything or even reorder it. The state was very specific in that their order, while it's in effect, takes precedence. However, once it goes out of effect, any local orders kick back in automatically.
Now, did our emergency order empower the county health officer to issue the stay-at-home orders, or without that emergency declaration, would he have had that authority?
He has that authority. The statute references that the health officer may use all known measures to prevent the spread of infectious diseases. And my knowledge of the English language is limited, but all known measures is very broad.
The declaration of emergency allows us to recoup our expenses through FEMA or state if the resources become available. It changes the way we track it, but it really didn't amend Jamie's or the health officer's authority. It just allowed us different opportunities for reimbursement.
So the only conduit for control of that, as far as if the Board of County Commissioners, in a hypothetical case, say we did not agree with a particular ruling by a health officer, our only option would be the replacement of that officer.
As ill-advised as that would probably be, the answer is yes.
And it's just a hypothetical question,
And
so
I
that I
understand
understand these orders.
Sure.
It's not any suggestion that that's what
The-
we're suggesting, but a lot of people are asking a lot of questions about, that we're in a whole new realm as far as government taking on this much authority and power over people's lives, and they really don't really completely understand it. It's really changed in 2 or 3 weeks.
Actually, Commissioner, we're not in a whole new realm. We've returned to a prior realm, almost the pre-vaccine age. These laws were written at a time when infectious diseases could not be controlled easily, and consequently it was recognized that time was of the essence and that extreme measures might be necessary. And consequently, that's why that broad grant of authority is given to your local health officer. You've wisely chosen a good local health officer, and I'm sure you'll work with them to do what Leavenworth County government can do to assist in the control of this disease.
And
I think
absolutely,
there's-
they've done a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
there's
we
no
need
question.
to answer people's questions, though.
No, so I think, as it was mentioned earlier, the larger Kansas counties and those on the other side of the river already had these policies in place. And so the argument was, if you're an extreme western located county in Kansas, you may not agree or, again, would rather govern locally. So all that happened was the state went in and said, okay, all 105 counties should really be under the same policies and best practices. So our current date, I think, Mark, you said was the 23rd or 24th, right in there. It was 30 days.
I believe it's the 23rd, but
Which is just like all of our other peer counties. So we're following, there's consistencies there.
Yes.
And so I'm sure Jamie and the rest of his task force will update us whether or not those dates need to change. So But I thought it's interesting, though, a lot of the news is coming out from the county, but there's, been 3 or 4 times the number of cases found, private sector by, private doctors. I mean,
Yeah.
that's happening across the board. So while we get a lot of the attention scrutiny, it's clearly, those cases are being found, doctors' offices all across the region, so.
And I think that actually brings up a really good point about what we were talking about earlier. While the map is out there and it shows the cases we're aware of and the presumptive positive cases, there is the potential that people have went to their doctors and the doctors say, you probably have this, go home, and then they don't notify the county.
Right.
So while we're tracking 94 cases that are presumptive positives, which means we think they are, but they didn't test, there could be more that went to a doctor locally and the doctor said, well, I can't test you, I don't have the test, you don't have flu and you have all the symptoms, you have it. They issue them a letter. The person gets a letter that's presumptive positive with the recommendation to stay at home, but that doesn't necessarily get tracked back to
Sure.
the county. So 115 maybe, could be twice that, we don't know.
Well, we had the
Not
conversation with
sensational.
Jamie that, again, of those being tested, if you look at larger populations, maybe it's a 10% positive rate. Well, that means one could probably make the assumption that all those cases where they never got tested and they were told to stay home and, don't come in and overrun the health system, 10% of those cases likely would have it. So the numbers get a lot bigger real fast.
Yep.
So.
I have been impressed, just anecdotal evidence of people, how they are really following these stay-at-home orders. People are really taking them very serious, and there are always exceptions, but I have several families that are friends that they have an 85-year-old, father, and they don't want to expose him, so they're making sure that they stay isolated, and I think just pray that it works.
Yeah.
Seems to be the only thing that works.
Yep.
Anyways, anything else before we go on to the consent agenda? Has everybody had a chance to look at all the items on the consent agenda? Is there anything that needs to be discussed or taken off? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Voting?
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you. All right.
Why I look over there like they know I'm looking at them or something.
We're ready for Crystal.
Good morning.
Good morning, Crystal. How are you today?
I am well. That was the fastest we have ever approved planning and zoning cases. That was great, guys.
Don't jinx yourself.
I know.
Famous last words.
We do have one item, Commissioners, that was not on the consent agenda. And that's simply because it did not have a unanimous vote from the Planning Commission. So I have a request before you to approve Resolution 20-012. Over the last 6 months or so, this board has requested the Planning and Zoning Department to make a number of changes to our zoning and subdivision regulations in order to cut the red tape, if you will, for development. That is what these changes are to Articles 3, 4, 35, 40, and 55. Primarily, the changes here are that we are removing all of those requirements for sidewalks, street lights, curb and gutter sort of thing for the secondary urban growth management area. Furthermore, we are proposing to remove the secondary urban growth management area from our zoning and subdivision regulations. I will happily go through any of these changes that you would like to discuss. The Planning Commission did vote 7-1 to recommend approval of these changes, and staff is obviously also supportive of these changes.
Okay.
Crystal, I was just going to ask, did one opposite vote give a reason? Was there anything in particular?
The opposite vote felt that staff could work harder to develop urban growth management agreements, and that we should keep these in place in order to give the cities more control over their growth management areas.
Wouldn't that be the city reaching out to the county
I believe so.
responsibility?
I believe so.
I think given that most of the cities, in fact, none of the cities have reached out to implement a primary urban growth area, it seems kind of overreaching to have a secondary urban
I
growth
was
area.
going to say, we got enough stuff
I
to deal
agree.
with. So,
Did I miss it, or has it been brought back up, this idea or concept that in an urban growth area or where zoning might be extended from the city, if, say, after a period of time, I threw out a number like 5 years, I'm not saying that's the right period, but nothing has occurred in the way of development, these taxpayers are paying the tax for being in the city limits, but they're not getting any of the benefit.
oh, you're talking about an annexation.
Right, but in general, those
All right.
seem to have a lot of overlap as far as,
So
again,
the conversation that came up was if we would monitor any annexations by cities to make sure that they followed through with their development plan, and if they didn't, then to notify them that annexation would be reversed. We haven't had any of those annexations to deal with since we had that conversation. So the only annexations that have occurred since then would have been voluntary annexations, not forced annexations.
is it something that, is it an exercise that could be completed to look back over some period of time and see how many have occurred since, I don't know, if we went back 10 years or if we went back 20 years and notice that no further development has occurred, but those individuals have been
More
paying those
services
taxes, those
provided.
services, right?
We couldn't reverse those changes. I don't want to call it what's the term for, basically it's expired. Any time we had to do that, it would have expired.
Statute limitation.
Yes, there you go.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, after a city annexes an area through a non-voluntary annexation process, they are supposed to implement their service plan that was presented within 5 years. If at the expiration of that 5-year period, either the county, I would say, but most likely if a landowner within the annexed area determined in their mind that the services had not been expended, they can formally notify the city of that fact. The city then has an additional year to extend the services. If at the end of that additional year, the services it's believed the services have still not been extended, then a property owner could seek a judicial review to have the annexation voided. But there is a 5-year trigger period, and Commissioner Shimke, I understand where your concern is, but after 10 years, quite frankly, after 5 years, if no notice has been provided to the city, that window of opportunity is gone.
David, is there a way, though, even though the statute of limitations run out, that the county could maybe ask the city if they would consider a separate mill levy for areas like we're talking about that maybe were annexed but don't have the same services provided as the rest of the city but are paying the same mill levy?
That request could certainly be made by the county. It could be made by the property owners within the city, which at that time would be voters within the city. So yes, that request could be made. And a request could be made, quite frankly, for the city to de-annex the area voluntarily.
Okay.
So what if it's a voluntarily annexation? Is that a different animal?
You live by your decision.
That's what I thought. So, but after the 6 years, so they'd have to petition to be de-annexed?
Yes, it would require affirmative action.
Okay. So that could take another year?
Possibly.
Okay.
I don't think it would take very long at all.
No.
I don't think it would take very long at all, because I think the likelihood of a city ever de-annexing something would be small.
Right.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask if that's ever happened, just because I was curious.
Yes, Tonganochie did it,
Did they?
214th Street.
So there's a precedence, okay.
Yeah, by the school.
Yes. Used to be called Rogers Road when it was a city. It's 214th, now it's the county's.
So is there anything to look at even within the last 5 years, because that would be...
When we had that discussion, actually, we did look back 5 years, and there
hasn't been any.
There were
So
no
every-
annexations that would have been impacted by that.
Right.
So,
So all that has been done is well outside of those windows. So it would be those landowners that would have to petition the cities.
Petition to de-annex.
Right. And good luck. Okay.
De-annex or just change the mill levy, because really in the end, like we talked about, it's a difference in taxes.
And I'm not sure how a city would even go about doing that as far as different mill levies without some kind of a benefit district, which would usually increase mill levies. But
Well, Jeff, that's not the only thing, because, again, there are certain requirements that cities have that the county doesn't, like building codes.
right.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I've never seen it done before, but
Any further discussion on the resolution, what is it, 2012?
20-012.
Okay. Trying to remember. Yeah. 20-012. Anybody have any questions on it?
no.
No.
Then I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to,
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 All right.
That was 5-0.
Thank you, Crystal.
Have a great day.
All right. We are ready for Mr. Knoll, I believe. Eastern Gateway Concept.
Morning, sir.
Morning.
Hello. So before you today is the request for board action to accept the selection committee recommendation for the conceptual study of the East Gateway Bridge project. It is the recommendation of the selection committee that trans system be selected for this project. If there's any questions regarding the project or the scope provided by trans systems, there's those for you here today.
Yeah, I would just share with the rest of the commission that both Commissioner Culbertson and I sat in with Bill and staff, Olson as well, went through all of those recommendations and why there was consensus in trans systems in their approach. So I just wanted to share that if you didn't know, we were in attendance and it was good dialogue, so thank you.
It's actually like $20,000 cheaper than we thought it was going to be.
Yep.
I mean, somebody's outside.
Yeah, somebody's enjoying the outside weather.
So, commissioners have any discussion on this item? Commissioner Culberson, do you have any discussion on this item?
Sorry, I was trying to shut that bird up.
Probably hear it in here in a minute.
No, I just want to reiterate what Dad said. I think, this is probably the most important item that we're going to probably work on this year because, especially after this coronavirus, it's too bad this bridge already isn't in place because it's going to take something like this to recover from such a devastation to our economic status, I think, once this is over with.
Okay.
And I think that's exactly what we need to get this ball rolling.
Okay. Any other commissioners have any thoughts on this?
Bill, I was just trying to remind myself, do we know what the timeline was? Like how once this was approved and ultimately they got to work, when they thought they'd have?
Yes, I believe it's written within the scope.
Was it?
That it's 90 days.
90 days, okay. I just couldn't remember. Okay.
Then I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve Trans Systems to complete the study on the Eastern Gateway project.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion and voting?
Aye.
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 I think that was all of them.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Now, anything else for any formal action before we go to any discussion items? And we'll move on to discussion items.
Commissioners, I wasn't originally sure we would bring this back for discussion rather than put it on the agenda. This came before you in a work session format. We tried to take the feedback we received from that work session and put it into the resolution, but since there was so much new language implemented, I wanted to bring it back one more time for just discussion before we put it on the agenda for approval. And then with that, I'll kick it over to Bill.
All right. So some of the changes that are within this first, under Part 2, chemical dust control. Chemical dust control is purchased directly from a third-party vendor. In Leavenworth County, that's primarily Scottwood Industries. We've been receiving a lot of phone calls in regards to the chemical dust control, and I don't know if the commission members of the board here have received any of those phone calls, but information had been put out by Scottwood Industries regarding the direction that had been provided in the preparation of those areas. So we wanted to clarify from the previous resolution, we are asking Scottwood Industries to follow our maintenance cycles with the application of the chemical dust control and not necessarily provide us just a list with their time frame of application where we would be maintaining those or preparing those outside of a routine maintenance cycle. And so some of the items from the previous resolution, 2018-11, have been removed and had been clarified within item number 2.
It just formalizes what the board already approved,
Right.
just putting it into resolution.
Yes. So the second headline item is the hard surface dust control. So hard surface dust control is our double chip and seal applications, and so we have clarified some of that. So I don't know if the board has any clarification questions in regards to that.
You only got so much time to do what you can do. Commissioners have any thoughts on the 2020 gravel road dust abatement resolution?
Well, I had one concern, and I'm trying to find it in my agenda because I'm scrolling through on an iPad, but I had read as part of the process that it was something about, I'm not sure if I read correctly, but are we going to pre-approve a specific contractor who will be doing the hard surface?
No, that's on the chemical. What you're talking about, a contractor doing the chemical?
No, okay, that's why I said and I'm trying to find it because it was all under the same.
I believe that would be the dust abatement, and what would happen is we would go out for bid for dust abatement, and then that's the contractor that would be used.
Okay.
And to clarify one item within the dust abatement, there was some discussion that was had regarding whether those would be banked until a certain number of miles or a certain length of roadway was to be studied for the required improvements. And that is not within this document currently. If as a portion of a conditional use permit or a private development wanted to do the dust abatement, we could explore those on a yearly basis. Obviously, the smaller of the area you're going to do, the cost per lineal foot of roadway is going to increase, but that does not require the person to wait an extended period of time to have received that service. If they're approving of the cost of it, then they can go forward with that on a yearly basis. So that was one of the discussion items that was clarified in this document.
Yeah. what we were concerned with is that if the county didn't happen to be doing any projects, that just the the applications coming in wouldn't reach a threshold where you could equitably do the project. What we decided was that at that time, the applicant would have the opportunity, we could go out for bid, and if they decided it was too much, they'd have the opportunity to pull back. But we didn't want them to have to wait for 3 years to do something that they were willing to fund.
And I think one of the bigger items is the dust abatement's not eligible on the special use permits for businesses, correct?
The hard surface dust control is not.
That's what I mean.
The dust abatement is.
Okay.
The dust abatement, and that's one of the things I really appreciate that Bill did with this is he gave some nomenclature that's easy to distinguish between what's a double chip seal and what's an asphalt application, because before it was all just called dust abatement. This is the dust abatement is the asphalt process.
Right. And this is a double chip and seal, so it's not, doesn't apply for SUPs.
Yes, yeah. And that was renamed the hard surface dust control,
Correct.
so it's not confused with the asphalt overlay.
Yeah, I mean, I still think there should be further discussion, and as we look at 2021 or going forward, that if the cost overall, which we've gone back and forth between gravel, between a double chip and seal, and between asphalt, while the upfront cost is higher, if the better solution over time and a strategy over time is clearly the asphalt, then I think we need to look at how we could expand upon the hard surfacing, and again, where we get into some of the continuous, roadway, and maybe different financing terms over a longer period of time, ways that if the cost is going to be 2x or some amount more upfront, ways that we might still make it palatable for the taxpayer to select that option, so that we're going in a direction that is better for the county long term, rather than just fixing a problem that exists today.
I think we anticipate that the hard surface dust control of the portion of this could look quite a bit different, and that really it's going to be designed for those areas that are not continuous. So if you live in the middle of a dirt road and you want the area in front of your house, then the double chip seal probably works for that. But none of the other projects going forward, again, this is still in the works, but totally in line with what you're saying is, if it costs more long-term to double chip seal, why wouldn't we just asphalt everything? And that is what we're working towards. That this is just an attempt to get things moving for this year.
Yeah, and I think you also trying to get to some of those benefit district conversations, and making sure that you have the support, and therefore you've got continuous areas of hard surfacing versus.
And also the financing.
Right. The
5-year financing.
And I'm glad you brought that up. This does anticipate up to 5 years that the county would allow you to put this on your taxes for both applications. Is that right?
Well, the dust abatement, you can, the way this is currently written, you have to pay for the preliminary engineering inspection to verify the culverts and do your deficiency study.
Mm-hmm.
That cost is 100% cost up front after we receive a quote for what that would be. And then the actual construction costs are allowed to be financed over 5 years.
At 0%?
That's currently the way it works, yes.
Are you allowed to select your own engineering firm, or do you have to go through a county-assigned engineering firm for that?
That one's the county assigned one. It's whoever does the deficiency review.
Any other questions on the resolution? Then I'll entertain them.
Well, we're just going to bring it back next week.
We'll put this one on next
Put it
week's
on next
agenda
week.
for approval. Yep.
Right.
I don't have a question on the resolution, but I wanted to talk about something before you guys are done talking about this.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure.
I think we're done.
If you call it the dust abatement or the projects that we've got scheduled, groups 1 through 5, or actually 1 through 7 of the hard surfacing project that we're working on. I was going to bring this up in a meeting so I could see if I could get support from other commissioners. If you look at those groups, the first thing that pops out is there's not one single gravel road in the north end of the county that's getting hard surface in the next couple of years of these projects going on. So what I was going to see if I could find out if you guys would support the idea of starting work on a Group 8 and make some of those roads in Group 8 in the north end of the county, because there's definitely some gravel roads in the north end of the county that have the same traffic count as some of the ones that are getting hard surfaced in the south end of the county. So I'm not sure exactly how this got to be this way, but when you look at the map of Groups 1 through 7, and not one single road is in the north end of the county, it doesn't look very good. I'm trying to figure out, A, how it got that way, and B, how can we remedy that situation?
Would you be considering, like, County Road 30 being one of the proposals in that phase or group?
That wouldn't be, County Road 30 can't be a dust abatement.
It can't?
No, it's a county route.
Oh, yeah, so we have to.
We got to get all the funding we can from other.
Yeah, 33 is a great idea, and I totally support that idea too, because that would actually alleviate a lot of issues in the north end of the county. People can travel to Lawrence a lot easier. EMS and the sheriff.
Right here, designs on
that we
hold
need
on
that. Yeah, we need that west traffic way to connect the north end to the south end in 10, 15 minutes instead of 30 or 40 minutes. And that's a great idea too, but what I'm talking about more is actual gravel roads, through roads, not dead end roads, but through roads in the north end that are gravel now that we could hard surface. And I'm just talking about getting a plan together, create a Group 8 and look at the traffic counts up there in the north end and figure out which roads would benefit the community the most at the hard surface, but get something going on paper that looks like we're at least trying to support the north end of the county with this project, because if you look at the map right now, it doesn't look like that at all.
Jeff, I was just going to, go ahead, Vicki.
Go ahead, Vicki.
Oh, I disagree with Commissioner Culbertson regarding what he's pointing out.
What'd she say?
She agrees with Jeff.
So Jeff, I was just going to say, and I would totally be in support of looking at a Group 8. I think to answer your initial question was, these projects were identified by resident applications and interest. So I think just the difference was, or at least my understanding is, there hasn't been that level of interest or application submitted from that area. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be or couldn't be, just hadn't been being the difference, but I could be wrong.
I think that's a fair assessment, that a lot of these first projects were done because they were on the PRP program, and they had the
PRP, I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, and they had the participation that was required. Actually, there was one road in the north that would have been in your district
195th.
that
187th Street.
well, there was one that was in the PRP that they couldn't get the participation they needed, so it was booted out. Yeah,
Ranger Road.
and that would have been probably the only one that would have been considered at the time. But that's why you're seeing some of the traffic counts and that are lower in some of these projects that were done, is because they were in the PRP originally.
Right, and I understand, we base it on traffic count, and that the gravel roads in the south, typically 400 is the average traffic count in the south gravel roads, and typically 200 is a major gravel road in the north end. I get that, but what I'm pointing out is, or trying to point out, is, the reason we went to keeping all the SIF and RIF and DIP money in the townships is because way back we were taking all the building permit money from the entire county and spending it all in the south end. And that's specifically why we went to keep that money in the townships. And so I'm just trying to point out that, nobody's really noticed, but we're not doing much for the north end, and there's over $1 million. I can't remember what the amount was in there, but last I looked, there's some money to spend up there. So I'm just trying to get a Group 8 going on paper, so it looks like we're doing something.
That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I can offer one thing to that. So currently, one of the top priority projects within the department is to produce a map with our most accurate available information that classifies all of the gravel roadways into different classification groups by traffic count. And so it would create a visual representation of where some of our higher traffic areas are currently. I believe that we're working our way through that, and the last update I received the day before yesterday was we were up to about year 2016, and so we are currently actively pursuing that.
Okay.
So,
That's all I wanted to bring up.
back to that County Road 30. You were saying that it's on hold?
Well, I thought didn't we get a weekly update that said the design phase was on hold right now? Was that because you're gathering the survey information?
It is. They're doing geotechnical boring at the top of the hills to see how much rock is there, because their design for the roadway, it's a full design of the roadway, kind of like 178th Street. Mm-hmm. So there would be a design speed, and so they were wanting to ensure that they weren't doing large excavation through thick rock ledges. So they're currently doing the geotechnical boring, or that's in schedule.
Okay.
And so it's not necessarily on hold. It's just the final design. The design is pretty well complete as long as there isn't substantial rock. I guess that was
There's quite a bit of rock through there.
They're trying to determine whether it was diggable rock or loose ledge.
Blastable rock.
Yeah, hammered out. So they were that way when they go to how much class that type of excavation would be necessary for the price estimate. So.
And one of the other changes that they discussed is that it was originally being designed as chip seal?
Yeah, is that correct? Currently under the contract, the scope of services has that road being designed for a full geometric improvement, but a chip and seal surface afterwards, not an asphalt surface as we talked about. And so we had reached out to the engineer last week and made the request that design scope, because they're still in conceptual design and it just requires some quantity changes within the tables, be put up to a more of a dust abatement type standard with a 4-inch overlay, and they had indicated that they believe that they could do that without a change order, because it's still in design. Apparently this project was led through a process that included a group of like 4 or 5 other projects, but I'm not aware of their specific locations, but those other project locations were then canceled, so it was a bundled engineering package, and so there was some concern about that, but they thought that they could make that work under current scope.
I mean, some of the obvious.
Which road were we talking about? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
County Road
30.
County Road 30, Jeff.
Okay.
And that, I don't want to interrupt you, but that project, and speaking to what Jeff, it's not dust abatement, but as far as benefiting folks up in the northern part of the county and the western part of the county, giving a direct route into north-south and into access to Lawrence, that would tremendously benefit the folks.
Oh, yeah. And I've talked to locals, and they would be able to send their kids to KU and live at home. So
And
there's a lot of benefits. The sheriff has always asked to get some sort of transportation on that end so that they efficiently answer calls, because there's just no way to get from north end to the south end on the west side of the county.
Well, it was
Something I can't believe we haven't done 20 years ago.
I agree.
No, totally. In total support of. I think I just had a quick question. We know that the road surface type is a higher quality. Obviously, we've talked about the savings and expense over time. What does it mean, just as you were kind of talking through that? Does it also mean enhanced speeds? Like, what are some of the other just kind of obvious on a fully engineered project going from one road surface type to the other? Quality, doesn't seem to be any question about, or expense over time, maybe any question about, but are there some other just kind of obvious benefits? Or
No, not necessarily. So if you're a hard surface roadway, it's the geometric design of how the slopes,
right,
the hill cutting, the distance to the intersections, that are determined by the speed limit design. So if you have an intersection that's designed to a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, the driveway line of sight triangles and the intersection line of sight triangles that are required for safe turning are smaller, which would reduce your cut sections in some of your hills if you had driveways that didn't meet those requirements.
Okay.
And some of your relocations. But as far as hard surface, they're both considered hard surface. It just goes back to the long-term maintenance cost of, there would be an upgrade cost.
Sure, more upfront.
Upfront,
Yeah.
but then a long-term savings if you did create this as a thoroughfare for the north part of the county to get along the west side, it probably would experience agricultural traffic that'd be heavy, which doesn't really coincide with the double chip and seal as much.
Right.
It's going to crack and then allow your freeze thaw to break it up and hollow it. So
I just wonder if there was any other kind of obvious benefits, because I get questions about speed limits fairly frequently. In some areas it's 35, in some areas it's 55, and one is clearly less safe than the other, and it's sometimes hard to answer those questions. And I just wondered if even sometimes surface type would have an implication. So, doesn't sound like it. Okay.
It's just design. It's just a design speed.
Yeah.
When it's done. I don't know what it'd take to do a 55 mile an hour speed limit design road now.
No, there's just several out there that probably shouldn't be. Just it is what it is, right?
That fell in the old design
Right.
standards.
It's 55 if you do not have something in place.
But can you still do the 85th percentile on some of these roads?
Yes.
If you, to change the speed limit, like you were talking about? If you can do a study that if, 85% of your people are doing the speed, you can change it to that?
I believe that's the way that is, if you wanted to, I believe it, the process I'm familiar with was we would do speed studies. We almost never found that the speed was as fast as reported visually, generally speaking. But then by resolution, the Board of County Commissioners can set a speed limit.
But you typically would not want to do that if the road has just been designed and built to 35 miles an hour.
Oh, you wouldn't want to raise it.
You would not want to raise it for the liability part of that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, the Board of County Commissioners has the authority to set speed limits upon review of an engineering study. So you have comprehensive powers to review all of your roads and the speed limits of those roads. The statute does require, though, that it be based upon engineering recommendations.
Okay.
And I'm sorry if there was a miscommunication. I thought you were talking about reducing speed limits.
Well, either way.
Yeah, I've never.
No, I meant either way.
Yeah, I've never explored increasing speed limits.
That's.
I just was curious. I mean, again, the questions have come up on some newer projects, and we're redesigning and improving roadways, and so sometimes I think there's a misconception that also comes along with speed. And we're talking about connectivity in the County Road 30 projects, and an obvious one. Connectivity also happens if you can get from A to B a little bit quicker. I did have one other question, and Bill, thank you for the project update and the new map, and that all's amazing. So kudos to you and your team. 4/1 has been a date that we've talked about a lot, specific to utilities, and I think I saw maybe one of our utility groups wasn't going to meet the 4/1 deadline and had been delayed, which also brings up the utility kind of task force or committee that we wanted to put together to see what we could do to improve some of our policies. I just wanted to see if 4/1 is now come and gone. I think there's probably still utilities on projects that haven't.
Well, I'll go better than that, Commissioner. I believe it was October when they said it was going to be moved in 120 days.
Is that what it was?
Yeah. So then the 4/1 came. So.
And so I guess my question was is that I think in that update there were some projects that were implicated in those delays. And do we have any idea if there's going to be challenges as far as 2020 projects in general?
So the most challenging of the dust abatement projects, assuming that's what you're primarily referring to as the dust abatement.
Yeah, I can't remember what group it was. I think it was
It's
Bettis is the
Bettis
contractor,
doing
but
it.
yeah.
It's the only group Bettis is doing it. And yes, that had 7 miles of line relocation. So they did change. AT&T did change their design in order to get out of an NOI permit situation and increase the amount of boring they were going to do and not as much trenching. We are requesting that they split the contract into 2 contractors so they could
Speed it up.
yeah, try to do it consecutively and be working in 2 different areas at the same time. The April 1st deadline, I think, is met in several different areas. I was speaking to the all-terrain drilling company from Lansing just yesterday. And so in some of these areas, the new line is in, it just has not been switched to the pedestals, which is, according to Bellin, a very short process. It's just tying it in. All the lines are actually like in a lot of these different areas. So it was the area north of Tonganoxie, which I don't have, is on that dust abatement map that has been
219th.
Yeah, so there's like McPherson, I believe, and 219th, and some of the roads in that area north of Tonganoxie that they are starting on today. But in that one specific area, yeah, they're giving us a mid-August time frame, and it was in October. They had previously provided you that. And so I don't know that there's necessarily a need for a committee to discuss it. I think there needs to be a little bit of a different direction moving forward on any projects where staff starts the acquisition of the additional right-of-way and different drainage easements that they need way sooner in the process. Have that provided to them from the consultant before the whole design's really even hardly off the ground. That'd be that one of the very first, get your exhibits and all your legal descriptions and start your land acquisition. So as the design is being completed, you're already moving through the utility relocation aspect of the projects. Obviously, first, a lot of times you have to acquire that additional easement, but start that process early. An earlier step in the process. So I don't know that it needs to be really explored. I think it just needs to be addressed way sooner. Now, in this situation, I think there was design change. But if we were to develop like a Group 8, it would be my suggestion that we look at the existing right-of-way in that group and immediately notify AT&T of our intentions to make this a dust abatement group, even if it was a 2024 project. If they're in, Mark and I spoke about this, if they're in 50% or 75% of our roadways here in Leavenworth County, and if this is even a 2024 project, you immediately notify them of your actions and the fact that you created that dust abatement. But for some of these bridges, I think we can just change the timing of maybe when we're getting the easement exhibits and legal descriptions and when we're starting the land acquisition, and get that before the design's even nearly in place, because they should be able to develop the area that they need really as soon as the survey field work is completed, and then take that information and start getting your utility located. So by the time your design is complete, in a lot of situations now, not maybe for a dust abatement, it has 7 miles of movement, but for a bridge, have that done when the design of the bridge is complete. And so your utilities are already moved into a different location.
Well, I think everybody would support that. That makes a lot of sense. I think there was also this idea or concept of, again, understanding where all of these utilities are currently at, right? So, again, it sounds like the utility companies sometimes don't exactly know. Now, dig safe or somebody goes out there and obviously, marks them up. Sounds like 2 or 3 different touch points where some type of mapping could or should exist, in which case now you don't have to be as proactive because you already have the map. So the moment that, you go to look at a project, we're already going to know whether there's 1 or 3 utility challenges before we ever go into it.
Well, to that point, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the project scheduling table for preliminary engineering that was provided for E58. I don't know, did you provide that to the commission yet? The blue
That
table.
came out last week. They should have got that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the project scheduling. So in the future, for all projects that are approved, we'll determine the size of that project, put that project on a 14, 19, or 22-month schedule generally. That's basically the direction that KDOT has given. All those steps that were provided in that sheet, there are a number of days to the bid letting that you should be in that process, so we'll be creating a schedule for all those. But to address the utility situation, there's a pre-design field check. After the board approves a project and you have sent out your RFPs and you've solicited your preliminary engineering services, the county needs to call out, the county staff needs to call out a utility locate, so that way you can identify all the utilities that are there, have all those utilities marked in the field prior to your initial walkthrough with your engineer. Your engineer will then call a secondary utility locate in under their own name, so then you have a Southern Star or a gas line or a utility conflict. They can start coordinating that. But you create that list before you even step foot on the project with your engineer of here's our list of utilities. For instance, 178th Street, we have the design set, but before Napier even started that design, we could have had suburban water out there,
Right.
potholing it. And so these are things that just need to, when they are taking place, whether it's part of the design process or not, the county needs to initiate that first step of the utility locate. That's always the very first thing I do when I'm starting a project is, as soon as the board approves it and you have an engineer that you've received a proposal from that you're going to accept, get your utility locate out there prior to even walking the site with the engineer so everyone knows here's where we're sitting with utilities, because they are always the slowest.
But on a dust abatement project, if they installed the utilities according to the county policy, we wouldn't have to move them.
No. You're talking about the phone lines in the road.
That is what I'm talking
And
about.
they're like,
Yeah, a couple inches deep. So if they would have been put in properly, like according to county policy, we wouldn't have to have AT&T out there delaying projects to move their lines.
and even their own policies.
Yeah.
Not only county policy, but their own
They are.
policies.
Yeah.
I believe it's phone lines, you can correct me here, but isn't it 12 to 16 inches they're supposed to be, or approximately 18 inches minimum?
So if they're violating their own policies, does that impute liability on them?
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Does that impute liability on AT&T for monetary damages to the county?
Well, in my mind, AT&T is always liable.
I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. Is that
Some of
very
those-
difficult to recover?
Some of those lines have been out there for 60 years. They may have been 18 inches deep when they put them in,
Oh,
you know.
well,
I don't think
So
so. No.
it'd be tough to go back now and say, well,
Commissioners-
you did that 60 years ago, you did it wrong.
Commissioner Stephen, it is purely anecdotal, but I have received claims from AT&T and other utilities where our mowers cut their lines. And we don't till 18 inches deep with our mowers.
Well, I think the approach is a great one. I think the sequencing makes a lot of sense and starting all of those things sooner. I think the more challenging part is, we had projects we didn't get done last year that fell into this year. And now,
Because of utilities.
because of utilities, and we made commitments, we've even sent out letters, and so we've got residents out there that expect and assume that everything's on track and good, and then we get another update that it's not going to be 4/1, now it could be August, in which case we might miss the 2020 schedule altogether, so it's like death by a thousand cuts.
I think obviously we can't go back in time and change anything that we've done. But I think all of the McEnany, we've got 2 dust abatements ready for McEnany they're going to start. They've given us the date of April 26th. is when they're going to, April 15th, they're going to mobilize. And so I think we can stagger the current already completed relocations and the projects, in that they can probably roll through most of theirs without having any conflict. So I think that, the information that I've received here in the last week and a half is that those are going to be able to be done coinciding with AT&T's relocation. It's the BOCC that we're going to need to stay diligent over the next 2 or 3 weeks, 2 weeks probably, and really try to put as much pressure on AT&T as possible. And then also, I'm going to, once AT&T does get that under contract, if it is the same contractor from Lansing that's done all the rest of them, I'm wanting to try to communicate with him the urgency that we're really wanting to get these done. And he'd stated he'd already contacted and been in conversations with BOCC regarding their time frame on some of this. So I'm hopeful that through open and forward communication, we can try to address that and get that done this year.
Yeah, and I don't know how many, we've done the exercise once, but when we talk about, I think that was 7 miles that Bettis was doing, that's right? I don't know how many homeowners that is, right? But the homeowners come to the county and go, you told me last year, then you told me this year, and I think bad news doesn't get better with time, and so communication is key. And so if there's anything they can or should do in addition to putting pressure on whomever that might be, I'm fully in support of that. If you have 20 residents or 100 residents making phone calls to whoever it is at AT&T to make their life less enjoyable.
Well,
but there's only so much we can control, and so a lot of times it's just education and communication, and it's...
Yep. And I think communication both from myself to Mark and myself through Mark to you guys as a board is important. So, I expect that unless, I would happen to take a vacation or something comes up where they actually close down, even working from home, I would expect a weekly report to come out from our office with the latest information that we have available. And I can assure you that we are diligently putting as much pressure on these different engineering firms and contractors to try to produce accurate information as we possibly can get and move these things forward. And so, if today, later this afternoon, hopefully, E58 will go out to bid, possibly in the morning, but maybe as soon as today. Water line relocation is complete on the east side. They're working on the west side today, which I haven't been out there, obviously. And then the phone line starting on Monday and should be done by Wednesday or Thursday. And so the utilities will be ready to go then. If suburban water comes through today or tomorrow with their potholing and gives us the final notification on 178th Street, we should be prepared to let that for bid the following Wednesday, a week from today. And so I think and we've got a pretty good sound timetable on all the McInerney projects. We are developing those same E58 style sheets, going back and listing all the different steps that have already been completed. I've tasked Warren with that. So everyone can know this is where we're at and if we've missed any steps along the way for any of the projects that are coming up. And so as I am confident that that information that I'm providing is accurate, I will provide all of that as soon as I have it. I don't want to provide you with false information or anything that then you pass on to a constituent.
No, and I just want to reiterate, it's been awesome. The communication from you and your team has been great, and staff, no question. You see those things that, again, we've all been looking at and trying to hold utility companies accountable to some degree. And since last year, we've been talking about April 1st, and we're here, so I had to bring it up.
Yep.
And yet we're still talking about projects that are now in jeopardy because they didn't meet their deadlines.
Right.
And ultimately, it's the county that looks bad.
Yeah. It's easy to blame us, I guess. But it's even easier for us to blame AT&T when we know for a fact that it's them. So I think the redesign on their part is what caused this delay. If they would have went forward with the original design, I think we'd still be on track. The problem is they didn't want to have to go through the hassle of the
NOI permit.
the NOI permit, so they changed it up to do boring. So that's the delay there. Really, but going back clear to the beginning of this, and that's what Bill is saying, is that he's addressed this on our end.
Sure.
So that we're not at their mercy anymore going forward. It's a much more systematic approach. It's the right way to do things, and that's the approach on all of our projects that he's implementing. And since you thrown out April 1, the other date, and Bill just mentioned it, but I didn't hear Commissioner Culbertson jump in, E58 is on track and will be going out for bid either today or tomorrow.
And hopefully we'll get
Yeah,
some bidders.
And they're down there working right now, I can tell you that.
Yeah, and the phone company will be there Monday. And so we're going to have that a 30-day bid window, opening on Friday, May 1st, which I believe is in that schedule that was provided. And then probably best case scenario is we could issue a notice to proceed by the second or third week of May, maybe the 15th. But they would be removing the existing structure. I believe that the concrete girders that were ordered are supposed to be available approximately June 1st. That's a 203 working day project from what our construction engineering contract is with MHS, which puts it clear out into January completion timeframes. Ideally, because of the type of construction we're doing, they don't have to build false work, a whole bunch of false work underneath this structure. It's not quite the same construction as like a haunch slab bridge. And so, I don't know if we need to have any discussion, but the time frame that had been previously set on it is approximately 203 working days. I was hoping to initially, when I looked at it, I wanted to put a completion date of December 1st on the project. I don't really want to see us. I've built bridges through the winter, and they have to wrap them and heat them and bring out propane tanks. But ideally, we'd wrap this thing up no later than November 15th. But
Yeah,
I think that's the last schedule said November 15th, but I was wondering, is that not necessarily when traffic would be opened up, right? That's just final completion, but traffic could possibly get approved to open back up before then, a week or two, or?
Yeah, generally not, but
No, okay.
Usually they're going to set their job site. Usually they'll put a job site trailer. Yeah, they'll set their job site trailer right on the road or right adjacent to the roadway, and they'll be out there. If they're doing any concrete pouring when it's going to freeze, I think they have to heat it for 10 days. So they'll have a propane tank out there, but they'll be seeding and doing some different activities. But from the time the cure period is up on the concrete to the time they get out of there, they're just going to be seeding and getting out of there. Now, we might not close the project completely. If they say they finish it November 1st, we can open it up to traffic while grass is coming up and different things. And so, it's just a matter of, we can do it prior to like the closing of the SWIP permit. So, the date of January 15th is supposed to, your 203-day calendar day is like your final approval, which would be the closure of all your permits and the final acceptance of the projects. There is a point in there that I guess you could open the bridge way before, if somebody had a seeding problem because of the timing of the year.
Yeah. And we'll just wait till we get closer to see, but that's kind of what I was thinking is, if it's just signage or striping or seating or something, we're not going to let that get in the way of open traffic.
Got to get somebody to bid on it first, Commissioner. Hopefully we'll have several bidders on, you said open May 1st?
Open May 1st.
Yeah.
So I don't know if, how the, under our current stay-at-home order, we do have a go-to meeting set up for that bid opening, and so we are going to accept the bids by appointment. I'll take them on the steps of the courthouse, or you can do certified mailing and mail them into the courthouse.
County club. Yeah.
Yeah, but I prefer them to make an appointment and just drop it off. Because we received no bids in the previous bid letting, and I don't know the specifics of that.
I think it was because of the partial design. Nobody wanted to bid on something that wasn't 100% design.
Yeah, I'm going to reach out to at least two of the contractors who I've previously worked with quite on several different bridges, and see if they kind of try to get an indication ahead of time. If reach out and see what the interest is, and
Yeah, I think we talked to a couple of them because we were worried that maybe it was these involved with late completion or something, but I think all the ones we talked to said it was because of the partial design.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to ask one last thing, and Jeff, you spent a little bit of time on this too, and just to update you, Bill, when we did this, as we're working on this new comprehensive plan, one of the things that get brought up nonstop is internet, right, and connectivity, and we have to educate people all the time that that's not what we do, right? That's AT&T, who we've been talking a lot about, for example. Through a lot of these projects, I think we're getting questions too as far as, if you've had a line that's been there for 60 years, is it even operational? Is it obsolete? If something's obsolete, why is it having to be moved? If you're going to lay new line, is it improved services? And I think now people are experiencing, probably more than ever, county residents, now that they're maybe doing homeschooling or a number of other things, how dependent we are on, technology, and getting some of these maps and going back to these hubs and understanding where residents can tie in and get better services than maybe they have now. So many people are dependent on their phone, or now it's a hotspot or whatever that looks like, and I don't know if that's something that would make sense to do a committee, or if just at the end of the day, we're going to have very few answers to questions being asked. But it's like, they're coming in, they're obviously spending time, energy, and resources. We don't know if the product or services they're providing is being improved, where these hubs are, how we can get people to connect to them. Mike's brought it up a ton. I know Jeff's done a lot of research on it, and it's just, what's essential? Well, Netflix probably isn't, but teaching your kid is. So there's some real problems that, if people thought it was bad before, when homeschooling started a couple weeks ago, it got real serious. So
I take it you've heard from some people too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can offer one piece of information regarding that. So from the last census, CenturyLink, it received grants for rural areas. I don't know what the new lines they're installing. I don't know if AT&T has notified the county of what type of wiring they're exactly putting in, but there is new technology out there that's available that allows you to push a higher speed internet through copper lines that will allow for streaming instead of just typical dial-up service. But generally, unless it's, and that was based off of the 2010 census information that was received, what areas were available for that, and then CenturyLink had to go out and apply for those funds and then receive them. But really it boils down to the number of residents in an area and whether or not it's your density of how many users you're going to have until we have 5G connectivity or something.
Right.
I think that's the challenge for AT&T, is they understand that the future is wireless. So investing a lot of money in hardwired infrastructure makes no sense to them. But the gentleman that was here from AT&T that we met with, he did mention that AT&T has their policy currently is no new copper. So everything they're putting out is fiber, if they can connect it to fiber. So obviously in some of these areas where we're going in, they can't connect their fiber to a main copper line a mile away. Doesn't make any sense. So they may be going in with copper in those areas. They don't inform us, I guess, of that, but they do have an internal policy at AT&T right now of no new copper. So if it can be fiber, it's fiber.
But on the monies available and grants and things like that, I believe the state set aside some money, $10 million, I think, for rural internet. This area is probably not going to qualify for that. It's going to be more of your towns out west that their banks don't even have high-speed internet or something. So I wouldn't think
Yeah,
we would be
I don't
eligible.
disagree with you. I just, it's very problematic when they're in the county conducting business, making money. We have very little visibility.
Right.
You know, it's hard to hold them accountable. They don't share with us what they're doing. These are all things that, at least for me, are incredibly problematic. And because we get a lot of questions about it. I mean, that was one of the top 10 that came out of our, all of our
comprehensive plan
meetings. Yeah, and it's like, it's challenging that we can't provide better direction or resources. And again, to make matters worse, they're impacting projects left and right, whether it's time or money or all of the above. We just don't seem to have a lot of recourse. We've got to be professionally persistent. Just
It's
trying to
the
figure out
number
what.
one issue I hear about.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
it's a very real deal. I'm not saying we can
as
solve
far
it.
as with the dealing with the concert.
I was going to say, I might challenge that because I get a lot more calls about gravel and muddy roads than.
Well, I meant dealing with the comprehensive plan.
Well, I'm talking about
I know what you mean.
since the world changed 3 weeks ago, I've gotten more concerns about the high-speed internet
Sure.
and learning from home.
Yeah, you mentioned GoToMeeting. You know, these kids are Zooming with their classes and trying to stay connected with their teachers, and a lot of places that just
Can't do it.
that's very problematic. And you know, if there's anything the county can do, I'd like to explore those things. I realize that AT&T is one of the largest, most powerful companies out there, and I agree with the county councilor that they're always liable. So, and I'm just like, if you're going to go in there and slow down projects, at least you could do is upsize, upgrade, improve. If you're moving dial-up that isn't hardly being used because everybody and their brother's using a phone, right, a wireless phone, and hotspot, like, I just don't understand it. And I guess I'm going to keep asking questions until somebody can explain it to me.
This schedule you provided us with, this is really great. This is good for these projects. And is there going to be a place that citizens can access that at some point?
My goal is to, continue to develop these until we have them accurate. But yeah, I think that they need to be put out on the document center. From board approval of a project, moving forward, obviously we can only collect back so much information and stuff. But if we say approved a new bridge project, that would be produced up front at the very beginning. We knew how.
Because this is what people ask about. They want to know, well, when's the project? When's this going to happen? And you could refer them, go online and
Document Center. One
Yeah.
for every, or we had a projects page previously we had produced, that if the county website's redeveloped in the future, we could have one where it's an interactive map, you click on the icon of the roadway, and it pops up all the information about estimated cost, time schedules, all of that.
that'd be fantastic.
Those things are possible. It just takes a lot of time.
One last question I had was the letter we sent from the commission on 158th and K32 highway, the stoplight study that we requested. Have we heard any response?
Have not.
Okay.
KDOT shut down, and so I did reach out to the head of the District 1, Leroy, his last name's Boyd, but Leroy Boyd, I believe it is. Anyway, he...
Jim Pickett's replacement.
Yes.
He went from Seneca to Bonner to Topeka. And so I reached out to him and provided him a copy in case he hadn't received it from the Senator Braun. And he said that he would forward it on to their Bonner Springs district. But they don't do a traffic study that's accurate. You don't want to do it under stay-at-home orders. And so no real information has pertained to that at this point. So, something that as things normalize, we can re-engage and pursue.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Knoll?
Thank you for all your.
I don't have any questions, but I was going to just reiterate what I mentioned before. I'm not asking for any official board order or anything, but while he's here and you guys are here, so are we kind of in agreement? Maybe we could have that, especially since he's going to be scheduling traffic counts and stuff here shortly, kind of geared toward a Group 8 based in the north end of the county.
Is this the year they're doing the traffic counts on gravel, or is it blacktops this year?
Well, they had changed that again prior to when I had started,
Okay.
and so they were trying to do the north half this year. But we, after about March 15th or so, we suspended doing traffic counts because the traffic counts are going to be lower.
Yeah, it's not going to be an accurate year.
Not going to be an accurate year. So we tasked Tim with working on. Obviously we've taken different traffic counts with different types of counters and over different periods of time, whether some of them were over weekends, some of them weren't. And so what I've tasked him with is we need as accurate as possible. Obviously we know that there's going to be some discrepancies within it, but going through every single gravel road traffic count, doing an evaluation, some quality control on that. If you have more than a 10% difference between any 2 years, exploring why that might be, if there was different types of counters, if one was over the weekend or not. Try to determine what is a range of traffic. Currently, I'm having him identify by color coordination roads between 0 and 50, 50 and 150, 150 and 250, 250 and 350, and then I believe 350 and above would be the final group. We may have gone 350 to 450, I'm not sure on the top of my head, but that would identify 4 or 5 classes of roadway and create a map, and we could easily, through color coordination of the map, identify the highest traffic areas in the north part of the county from the data that we currently have. And then if, after it's been produced, if you feel that there are some roads that may be inaccurate, then we can go back in and specifically hit those areas with new traffic counts when things normalize and adjust as needed. But it creates a good starting point for future analysis. So we can use that for Group 8. I'm hoping that he has it done within the next 2 weeks. I'm putting a lot of pressure on him to, he's been working very diligently specifically on that project for the last several weeks.
Well, and all things being equal, a traffic count, makes the most sense, and I know that's how it typically works, but for example, County Road 30, the traffic count's only like 200 cars a day, but if it was hard surface, it's a completely different ballgame. It would be an arterial road, probably 2,000 cars a day. So, take it with a grain of salt. The traffic count's one thing, but once you change a gravel road to a hard surface road, then it could completely change the ballgame.
Yeah, it might double.
Well, like in County Road 30, I guarantee you it's more than double. I think it'd be tenfold.
Yeah, and I think doing the existing and then to some degree what you can, forecasting, right, what you think the traffic count would be. But Jeff, I think you got all the support you needed.
Okay, yeah, good deal.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Knoll, while he's here?
I don't have anything.
And I don't think we really have a lot of updates other than watching meetings online or on YouTube.
Well, I did attend by phone conference the Workforce Partnership meeting.
Yes.
And the one thing that I'd like to get out there is that they have created a new Facebook page, and it's Workforce Partnership KC, and they're listing all of the available jobs. on their Facebook page, which is, and the majority of them are those that include businesses that are still essential and operating.
Okay.
That might be useful for people who have been laid off.
Seems like there's quite a few jobs available now. But there's also a lot of people that's lost their jobs too.
Yeah.
Can't forget
Tons.
about that,
Right.
folks.
Mark, earlier, the clerk committed to writing the letter to help us so that we can at least do our part with all of our different representatives and contacts with the state. Who on staff was going to write the recommendation letter on the delaying second half property tax payments?
It's already been done.
Oh,
Letters were sent out Monday, I believe.
okay.
Yeah, you didn't get a copy of it?
Maybe I missed it.
I'll make sure you get it.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to get a copy so that way I could get it to all the people that I can do my part. So
No, they went out to all of them.
good.
Okay. I signed them, I came in Monday. Yeah. I thought
Outstanding.
everybody looked at the letters.
I was planning to be on that call with Secretary Colin. Is anybody else going to be on that?
Oh, this afternoon.
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay.
I'm going to be listening in this afternoon on a call as well with the White House call that's scheduled for this afternoon for local and state representatives. Update on the coronavirus.
Okay. So
That's
you're gonna
not the
listen?
same, is it?
No,
Okay.
this is federal. She's talking about. Okay, so you'll take that one. Vicki, you're gonna listen on that one?
Yeah.
Okay, and you'll take Secretary of Commerce? Okay. Anything else today? Well, there's several things. Everything is on either phone call or
Would it make sense? I don't want to take time away from from Mr. Miller or Mr. Farley, but should we at least get some type of a written update? I know that we're putting out publications all the time and trying to stay out in front and report cases and keep people informed, but do we want to make that a part of our, whether it's administrative business or I don't know, just weekly, whether they're here or not? Again, I'm not trying to steal their precious time away. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that. I just thought.
I agree. I agree in writing would be sufficient, but probably maybe once a month if he would meet us.
Well, I mean, I know he's happy to be here if there's a change. I realize that week over week, what's really changing now is the cases, right, and counts. Still getting lots of questions, and I don't imagine that's going to subside. A lot of questions around businesses, in which case we've got the Chamber's getting out communications. The LCDC's been getting out tons of communications about all these different programs. The CARE Act was just signed last week. Those are all things that are, again, more private sector related.
Right.
But just overall, health or status of the county, I think people expect to hear from us and not to steal a couple hours of Jamie's time. That's not the case.
I agree with that, but I have heard comments from a number of citizens that when he did appear here, that they were very impressed and thought that they got a lot of information when he did appear.
Well, I think that's where we need to get the information.
Right, and they do put out a daily update, and they're especially on social media, they're putting out stuff. When there are changes, I do think it's very important that Jamie come in and have a chance to speak about that. Right now, on a weekly basis, because of the stay-at-home orders in place, I don't know what updates would be coming other than just counts.
Right.
So, I mean, we definitely want him here when there are changes. I just don't.
And on our website, do we already redirect or try to create traffic, right?
Yeah, there's a banner at the top for the COVID-19, and it puts it to where the Joint Information Center's putting out.
Okay. Anything else for?
No, a lot less meetings right now to report on.
Yeah,
sure.
really,
So.
there is. I mean, you can watch them. It's not the same as being there or participating.
Well, the only thing I would say that I've heard a lot of comments from your more libertarian people out there, questioning what's been done, and I would just say that, we are understanding of how this is impacting people.
Sure.
But we have to balance what the health officer says and the requirements to fight this virus with what the law allows and requires. And it's really impacting a lot of businesses.
And nonprofits, and
Yeah.
churches.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's impacting. The world changed.
And how long can it go on for some of these businesses? You've only got so much cash flow.
And that's real. That is real.
Well, unlike the federal government, we don't get to print money.
I was going to
Right.
say.
So we can't,
Let's not start.
we can't just offer a stimulus package that we don't have cash on hand for. But that is something that if the board wanted to, we could look at available funds, like maybe cash that came in over above what we thought would last year, and see what's out there. But it's going to be obviously very limited compared to the people who run the printing presses.
Right.
So, and when we vote on things, we actually vote here.
Right.
No, I think, again, staff, I think, has been great. They're continuing to do what they can. They're being safe, but they're being responsive. They're monitoring online. All the departments that can be are continuing to function. If you have questions, clearly email's probably the best. But the county is not shut down. The cities are not shut down. Access to public and large groups is shut down. So.
And like I said, I think all the information that we get from Jamie, that's her key contact. So. And nobody knows how long we're going to be in this situation. That's the scary part.
And the county health department and those people are doing a fantastic
They're
Excellent
doing an
job, yeah.
outstanding job.
Very impressive group.
No, it's what they train for. Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Voting.
Second.